What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And join me to do just that is Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
What's happening, man? Feeling a little festive over here. I don't know if the guys want to go to the wide shot of me, but I have a pumpkin behind me. Little Bill's pumpkin, if you will, right? Getting in the Halloween spirit. I know we might.
Did you carve that yourself?
I did not. I will give my sister all the credit. She is the artsy one in the family, and she was the one that made that happen. It's not a real pumpkin either, which is good because I can use it year after year. So it's not going to sit behind me and rot for the next week and a half or whatever. But everyone can expect to see that on the shows until Halloween arrives. So feeling good about Halloween, feeling good about week 8, man.
I'm glad you're feeling good about week 8. I am feeling shaky about week 8. A lot of bye weeks, a lot of questions, a lot of things hanging over us, which I'm very excited to break down with you today on our preview show. For the folks who are joining us for the first time ever, this is the structure of our preview show. First 2 segments, this is where we look at Boone's 6-pack of questions for the week. He breaks down a ton of big picture, micro topics there as well, so we've got a ton to get into in the first 2 segments. Segment number 3, that is literally no one's games of the week, where I pick 3 games that are not headliners by any means, but you got to care about these lovable little freak shows for fantasy football. And then segment 4, the hurry up offense. That's rapid fire questions, 40 seconds or less on the clock. And that's how we end the show every single week. But with that, let's dive into it here. Let's get into Boone's 6-pack of questions. Sound always gets me in the mood to talk a little ball here, Boone. All right, let's get into it. Let's get to your first question here for week 8.
I mean, we have to do the most obvious one. I know it's the low-hanging fruit, but will Lamar Jackson return, I guess, should be the first question. And will his return actually fix the Ravens, who have basically been broken since he left? And I say, will he return, because we're not 100% sure. He's still limited in practice. I think Vegas is tipping things off a little bit because the Ravens are 6.5-point favorites in this game right now. And the team that we saw the last few weeks before their bye would not have been 6.5-point favorites over anybody. So I think that's a pretty good sign that Lamar is probably going to be out there barring some sort of setback or something unforeseen happening in the next couple days. And him being back is just, it's such a game changer. And it's not just him too. Like, he'll get all the headlines, he'll get all the credit, but they're going to get a few guys back after the bye here. Nice to have that week off. Basically perfect timing for a team that was just going off the rails completely. And now they're going to get some guys back. Hopefully Lamar is the big one there. And that just changes the landscape for their entire offense, right? Lamar himself, as long as he's 100%, he is going to be back out there as an elite fantasy quarterback. And if there are any questions about whether you should play him or not this week, as long as he's playing, he will be in every lineup where I have him. You're not going to sit Lamar Jackson for anybody unless somehow you manage to trade for Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes along the way, which I doubt there's many teams like that out there. And then you start to look at the other players in this offense, right? Like Derrick Henry goes right back to being an RB1 for fantasy because we know he thrives in these positive game scripts. They haven't really had any since Lamar went down. And now this week, like I said, huge favorites. They're going up against the Bears, who are giving up the 12th most fantasy points to running backs. So that's a good spot for him. And he did remind everybody before the bye that he is still capable of putting up okay points even without Lamar. Had 130 scrimmage yards on 25 touches in that game, even though it was a loss, of course. But that was his second 100-yard effort of the season. The last time he had done it was with Lamar all the way back in week 1. So hopefully he gets back and he gets back on track here and really starts crushing it again. I think he's somebody that people should be out there trying to trade for right now because their schedule the rest of the season is one of the easier ones for fantasy running backs. So you get Lamar back, you get Derrick Henry rolling, and he's somebody that can certainly help you potentially make the fantasy playoffs and win a fantasy title. Also, you look at the receivers, right? Like Zay Flowers, he's been managing to still produce, right? At least 70 yards in 4 of his 5 outings this season, but continues to struggle with the lack of touchdowns. That was something that he had a problem with last year that kind of has always held him back for fantasy. And yet the last time he scored a touchdown was all the way back in week 1 when Lamar Jackson was out there, right? So you hope that Lamar coming back gives him a shot to potentially find the end zone. And the Bears are allowing the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers, the 3rd most receiving touchdowns on the year as well. So this is definitely a spot where you could play Flowers as a wide receiver 2 and maybe a wide receiver 2 with some wide receiver 1 upside, which he showed early in the season with Lamar. The tight end's not overly excited. I know Lamar's coming back, but Mark Andrews, he's had one good game this year. I don't think you can really trust him. I would rather grab Isaiah Likely. As long as you can find someone else to play this week, stash Isaiah Likely instead of holding Mark Andrews and hope that Likely can emerge as the season goes along here, because I still think he's the guy that has the higher fantasy ceiling if he gets that opportunity. Mark Andrews just can't be trusted. He's a tight end 2, and he's really just, a touchdown or bust kind of guy, which there's so many tight ends like that for fantasy. So I don't think you really need to hold on to him. And the other guys in this offense, I know you're a big Rashad Bateman fan. I don't know if you'd be willing to play him this week. There's bye weeks. There's a lot of issues that people have in their lineups with injuries and stuff. So maybe somebody would be desperate, but I think the other options like Bateman or a Justice Hill in the backfield as potential flex guys, I think they're just really, really risky desperation plays.
Yeah. On that last point, I think Bateman is and probably always was like a better in best ball type of guy. He's going to have some games. We know that because he's a good player and a good offense, but one thing that's been different about him this year, part of my calculus would be like, oh, well, he might be like a nice late round pick this year, is because, well, I do think he's really talented. And also he's always on the field on a good offense. They've actually rotated their wide receivers a little bit more than usual. Not Zay Flowers, who's run around on 95% of the dropbacks, but Bateman's at 76%. DeAndre Hopkins, 35%, Tylan Wallace, 34%. And this is not a team that plays a ton of 11 personnel. So Bateman has actually come off the field a little bit more than we're used to. And then you're really just counting on a handful of big plays, which we've seen one game all year. Now, obviously Lamar has not played all season long, but we've really only seen that 1 week out of Bateman. So if you're in a deeper league, I think you could do worse than Rashad Bateman as a bye week fill-in if you're really crunched at the receiver position. But at this point, not really a guy I think you're considering playing generally. On the entire Lamar question, I'm so excited just to have him back this year, man, or this week. Hopefully it happens.
Your answer when I asked if there was one player that you would bring back from injury, and I expected you to say like Malik Neighbors or someone who was out for the season, and I believe you said Lamar Jackson. And at the time, we thought he might miss like a game, so I kind of laughed at your answer. And yet he did miss a little more time. I still probably would have went with a guy who was out for the season, regardless. Yeah, it's great to have him back finally after an extended absence that I don't think we expected when he got hurt.
Well, I think my calculus with that was I have a 10-2 fantasy team right now because it's both head to head and also points scored every single week. So I'm 10-2, doing really well. It's a super flex league where I drafted Lamar Jackson, and I'm like, I cannot wait to just plug him back in that lineup. I want him back in there, especially because I didn't have. And I think Zay Flowers is also on this team too. So I'm very much invested in the Lamar Jackson experience. And I didn't have a QB3. My QB3 was Russ, who at that point was benched. My QB2, luckily, is Drake May. That's my only question, Boone, is now that I've elevated Drake May to the QB spot, has he done so much to earn staying in that QB spot and Lamar goes to the super flex spot, or is that going to cause locker room drama, based on what we're doing there from a culture perspective?
I mean, I know you're joking. The reality that I love to remind people of, though, out there, because people do have to think about with this when they're setting their lineups. You put the guy in the superflex spot who's playing at the later time every week, because then if an injury pops up later in the week, that guy's in the superflex spot and you might have another player you could throw in there. It just gives you more options, right? So I always make sure when I'm setting my lineups, it feels weird sometimes if you have like, a bigger discrepancy, like if you have like a Lamar Jackson and then you have like Michael Penix Jr. or something, and you're moving Michael Penix Jr. into your QB spot, Lamar into the superflex, it seems weird. But if one of the guys plays later, that's always just like a little wrinkle that I remind people of. But yeah, unless we get some sort of word that like he's going to be extremely limited or something like that, I don't think you hold Lamar back at all. I think you would have to have, like I said, Mahomes or a Josh Allen before you were going to even think about sitting Lamar down. And again, I know you're joking. I know you're just, trying to be funny in terms of who you should play in the locker room dynamic and all that.
Why do you assume I'm joking? You think I'm not a culture coach within my organization? I'm not a leader of men. I'm not a Dan Campbell.
Dan Campbell, man, that's a whole other conversation. He's doing such a great job. We questioned him about potentially filling those coordinator roles and the offensive line, and he's just solved all these problems. So hats off to him. But it does also say something that you can make that joke about Drake May and that he's come so far that we look at him now like almost an automatic top 5 fantasy quarterback and not far off the conversation of some of those elite guys. So it's an impressive early season for Drake May, and it seems like he's only going to improve. But yeah, just great to have Lamar back. And it's not just for people like you who get to put Lamar back into their lineups. It's for people who've been playing with Derrick Henry and Zay Flowers and kind of being dragged down potentially by some of these guys. Now we're going to see this offense elevate back up. And hopefully, like I was mentioning, the defense get a little bit healthier and a little bit better as well, because that's been a huge problem that really put the offense behind in a bunch of these games recently without Lamar. And they just weren't able to play catch up and get back in these games when they had Cooper Rush out there. So Lamar just gives them such a much better chance at success, and is going to give fantasy managers a better chance at success now that he's going to be back.
No question. I mean, the division's live for them after the Steelers lost that game. I think if they had beaten the Bengals last Thursday, then it might have been a little bit dicier, and it's still going to be a long road. They're 1-5. Okay. I don't mean to say like, yep, they're back. They're just write them in pen. They're going to the playoffs. Anything. It's going to be a long road, but obviously having Lamar back helps. The other thing I would say just about this matchup is that I think this is a little bit of a test for the Bears defense, because the Bears defense has played really well coming out of the bye the last 2 weeks. However, they've gotten it done on takeaways for the most part. They've gotten it done on takeaways against two offenses that are pretty limited. We know the Saints offense, Spencer Rattler's played well, but that was his first kind of like fall apart game. And they generally are they're not the most talented team in the world. They're scheming things up well, and Rattler's playing above his head, but we know what the Saints offense is. And then the Commanders the week before that, it's a weather game. Jaden Daniels is without Deebo Samuel. He's without Terry McLaurin. Bill Krosky-Merritt is a game script sensitive back, so he's not always consistently involved with the whole deal. So this, I think, is a little bit of a, hey, we're hoping Lamar comes right back, and we get to figure out if this Bears defense is a unit that is the sieve that it looked like to start the year, or if it's actually, no, they've gotten better in a few games now with more experience, some players back under Dennis Allen's defense. Do you have a take in terms of this matchup where we might see things go from the Ravens offense versus the Bengals defense, or excuse me, the Bears defense?
I mean, I tend to lean on the projected point totals, and it does seem like the Vegas expects this to be a high-scoring game that is going to lean in big-time favor of the Ravens here. And yeah, I think you said it, right? It was two easier matchups coming out of the bye. The answer probably lies somewhere in between for where the Bears defense is at. They're not quite as bad as they looked early in the season. They're not quite as good as maybe they looked at times over the last couple of weeks. And this is just going to be a huge test for them, because it makes it difficult when you're trying to project a game like this, when people are, and I do this often, are looking back at some of the stats from earlier in the season, some of the matchup-based stats. It really throws it out of whack when you have, such a small sample size, where you have a couple very easy matchups, you have some harder matchups, you have a new coaching staff early in the season trying to get things, everyone on the same page. So it makes it difficult to project. And yet I would just come back to where the projected point totals are at, who's projected to win this game, which is the Ravens by a large margin, and the fact that Lamar's coming back, and this is going to be one of the toughest tests that the Bears have faced so far.
All right, let's get to your next question, which is the topic of the week here, as I teased at the very top of the show.
Yeah, I feel like we could have spent the whole episode on this one, but we got a structure to abide by. This one is, how can you survive BYE-mageddon, right? We have 6 teams on bye this week, and there's some really good teams out there. The Cardinals, the Lions, the Jags, the Raiders, the Rams, and the Seahawks. A lot of big-time fantasy names on those rosters. So managers have been trying to figure out what to do all week long. Of course, I write my waiver wire column on Mondays. Hopefully everyone was reading that and picking up players to fill their lineups with those guys. And yet I know there are a lot of managers out there, I'm friends with a bunch of them, who don't necessarily pay attention very closely, who might forget to set those waiver claims early in the week. So I think it's a good idea for those types of people, or for people who just aren't necessarily happy with their rosters right now. Maybe they just realized they had more injuries than they expected because injury reports come out a little later in the week. So what can you do? What players can you go out and potentially pick up here to try to get by this week when you have so many guys, that could be out, and, not just the buys like we're mentioning here, but also some of these injured players as well. And I think quarterback's fairly straightforward. Like, people can go check out my rankings there. we're also going to talk about some of the backup quarterbacks who are turning into starters this week. We'll talk about them in a second. So let's just focus on wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends like we have on the screen there. And for receivers, the names that I would focus on here, Troy Franklin, Alec Manor, Alec Pierce, and Jalen Noel. I think there's a name on this list that you feel very strongly about. So I will not take that player. I will not steal that guy from you. I will instead talk about Jalen Noel here. And it comes down to all the injuries that the Houston Texans have at receiver. We saw this happen to the Texans last year. We thought they went out and got guys that were going to be able to give them a little more depth. And yet right now it's like very strange the way they've deployed this receiving core, even amidst all these injuries, right? Christian Kirk, last week on Friday, it seemed like he aggravated his hamstring injury, the one that he had earlier in the season. Doesn't look like he's going to play this week. Nico Collins suffers a concussion. It's a short week for them trying to come back. It doesn't seem like he's going to be cleared. We'll keep an eye on that, but I would doubt that either of those guys are going to play this week. And you would expect that, okay, these two rookies that they got, that we were very high on these guys before the season, and Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, these guys are there. They're going to step up. And yet they don't quite do that. Like, yes, Jalen Noel did have an okay game in terms of his production. Like with Collins leaving early, he played a season high 43% of the snaps. He earned 7 targets. He finished with 4 grabs for 77 yards. A lot of that came late in the game because they were playing Xavier Hutchinson and Braxton Berrios. Like, what are we doing here, Texans? Like, they don't trust the rookies that much that we have guys like that out there. And I get it early in the season, right? Early in the season, sure, the rookies weren't up to speed. But now we're approaching like midway through the year. You need these rookies to step up. I would hope that because Jalen Noel actually did have some production late in the game, that they will look to him and give him a little more opportunity this week. And yet I don't know that I can say that for sure, but he's somebody that I do feel like you could slot into your lineup and hope that he ends up leading this team again in receiving. Just, a versatile player. And obviously I'm not giving this breakdown to you. I'm giving this more to everyone listening right now, but a guy who does have that like high end athleticism, he can line up inside outs. I think he's more successful if he's lined up out of the slot, but they can kind of use him in a variety of ways. I really hope that they do that because I think he could be a wide receiver 3 flex option, assuming Kirk and Collins are out and assuming that the coaching staff gives him a little more opportunity and doesn't wait till the very end of the game. But you can't say that that is for sure going to be the case. And then Jaden Higgins is also a name that we can consider here, but I have much less faith in him because he's done basically nothing this year, right? So there's been some flashes. It's been weird how they deployed these receivers. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the Texans wideouts, but it's been a strange one. And yet there's got to be some fantasy value there, right? There has to be some fantasy value coming out of this group this week.
The funny thing is, you said there's one that you're pretty excited to talk about. And I think if we had just paused the tape there and allowed people to bet on which one, was the guy I was excited to talk about, I think the massive favorite would have been Jalen Noel because he was one of he's not though. There is a guy I'm excited to talk about on this list, but and I'm still excited to talk about Jalen Noel because this was, like I said, a prospect I absolutely loved. I thought was like a first round talent that fell to the 3rd round. And I mean, Boone, if they come out and they play Braxton Berrios as the slot receiver again this week, especially with Nico likely to miss his game with a concussion, I'm going to go freaking crazy, bro. I couldn't care less about the Texans and the success of that team other than I like some of these guys. I really like Nico Collins as a person and as a player. And like, I want the best I like CJ Stroud. I want the best for some of these guys. But I couldn't care less about the team's success. But I'm going to go crazy if they don't play Jalen Noel, especially because I saw this quote from D'Amico Ryans. This was a couple of days ago. This is him talking about Jalen Noel. Outstanding. Probably our most explosive player for us. He showed up big time for us. Jalen has that big playability in him. Excited to see him continue to flourish in that role. I'm like, yeah, maybe somebody like the head coach should decide to put him on the field more. I know that Ryans is a defensive guy, but come on. We can all see this with our eyeballs. I have a burner account on Twitter where I just post film, and it's only so that I can bet it in the reception perception site so I don't like slam the data of the site and cause it to crash, all this stuff. One of the tweets that broke contain and like made it to Texans Twitter because it's all these like explosive Jalen Noel down the field routes and plays. And Texans fans are all on this too. They're like, what are we doing? Why are we not playing this guy? He's 3% rostered in Yahoo leagues right now. So if you buy what Boone is selling there, what D'Amico Ryans is saying about his own explosive player that he may or may not give full-time reps, he's somebody you can pick up and just park on the end of your bench even and see what happens, even if you're not going to start him this week. So I'm really excited about Jalen Noel. And Boone, I think it's untenable to run out that receiver core that we saw last week. I just think there's no way they can do that.
Are you worried at all about Higgins? Like, Higgins also was somebody that came in that I thought would get a role in this offense pretty early. And yet, like last week, 63% of the snaps scoreless in that, or catchless, sorry, in that game. Catchless, scoreless, didn't do anything. Weird to me, very strange that he hasn't caught on more. And yes, some of it is how he's being deployed and kind of, but it's very weird to me that we haven't seen more from him this year, given all the injuries and Christian Kirk missing so much time and him really not kind of catching on in this offense, no pun intended.
He's, to me, very similar as a prospect to your boy Keon Coleman, where he's one of these guys that was a collegiate perimeter receiver that I think struggled to separate, and his best success in the NFL is likely to kick inside and be more of like a big slot receiver. As you know, the Bills have done that pretty much 0% with Keon Coleman. Yeah. And right now the Texans have kind of used Jaden Higgins as a supplementary X receiver, kind of behind Nico Collins, because Xavier Hutchinson they like as that move around flanker. It's either Braxton Berrios for whatever reason or Jalen Knowles, the slot receiver. So Higgins is kind of banged. And I think especially if he goes out this week and plays X, I'm really interested to see what he looks like there if he's starting in replacement of Nico Collins. So I think that's part of the reason why it's taken a minute. That doesn't mean he's going to do nothing all year long or he won't be a good player in the NFL, but it might just take him a minute and like them a minute to figure out how to use him, as opposed to Noel. It's a little, and that's why I was higher on Noel as a prospect. It's just easier to see the vision for him. Stick him in the slot, let him run downfield routes, get him involved in the quick game. But for Higgins, I think he's a little bit, even though he's drafted higher, he's a little bit more difficult in like how to get him on the field, if that makes sense.
All right. Well, I will admit a little behind the scenes for everyone that the reason I said that I knew there was a guy that you liked on that list is because we have a doc for one of our group articles that we have every week about bold predictions. And you actually had a bold prediction, I believe, about one of the guys on this list. Unless you changed it, there was that name on there. So is that the guy that you want to talk about?
That is the guy I want to talk about. Alec Pierce, number one, is another guy. I talked about him a little bit on the show with Ray Garvin earlier this week, where I just think he needs to be rostered in way more leagues than he is. He's only 25% rostered right now. And even if I didn't think that he could be a top 20 receiver this week, which is my bold prediction for him this week, is that he could be a top 20 receiver. So after flaming out with the Luther Burden prediction last week, I'm going to try one more time to talk about a team's like third or fourth pass catching option here. The difference is, though, between Luther Burden and Alec Pierce is, number one, Alec Pierce plays in a better offense. And number two, Alec Pierce actually is on get the burner account off the screen. We can't be showing the secret film Twitter account. Get that off the screen, producers. What are we doing here? But no, I think that Alec Pierce actually he has really evolved in his game as well. In addition to just being on the field all the time, he's running a bit more of a nuanced route tree. He's running more big in-breaking routes. He's running these routes that are not just static boundary stuff. We've seen him earn more targets in that way too, 10 targets last week. And he's still an explosive downfield player. And that's why I really like him this week, Boone, because he's got a matchup with the Titans, who allow the most yards per target on throws between 10 and 19 air yards, and fifth most on throws of 20-plus air yards, according to Fantasy Points data. So like the matchup, like the usage this week, Josh Downs is likely back off of his concussion, so that's what I was just muddy up the target. Yeah. That will likely muddy up the target projection a little, but if you're starting Pierce, you're doing it for the same reasons that you started Kayshon Boutte against the Titans last week. You're hoping for big plays. You're hoping for touchdowns. Pierce has yet to score this year, so he's hashtag due, as we say in the business.
Yeah, and he is the kind of player, too, that, like, even if you were wrong about this, you could be right. He could catch one long ball for a touchdown. So, yeah, I think he's a good call in a cheap way to get involved in what has turned out to be one of the better offenses this year. And yeah, they're doing a great job, and they have quite the receiving core there. I would like to see them use Josh Downs even more. He had been coming on there before the injury, so hopefully he comes back healthy and continues to be involved, and that doesn't hold Pierce back too much. But just a great receiving core there. And Daniel Jones, who would have thought, surrounded by this cast, that Daniel Jones would be able to be having the season that he is. All right, so let's go to running back next year, because we'll keep moving. Like I said, we could spend all episode on this, but we shouldn't. So at running back, I'm looking at Tajay Spears, Brashard Smith, Isaiah Davis, and Sean Tucker. And Smith is somebody who I've written about. I mean, going back to week 1, I had him down as a stash. And part of the reason for stashing him, it wasn't that, and we've talked about this in the show, that I thought he was going to break out as like a workhorse in this backfield, but that it seemed like there could be like a very clear role for him based on the fact that the other guys in the backfield were Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. And Pacheco and Hunt have been handling the majority of the carries in this backfield and really have struggled for most of the year, right? Like their production, their efficiency hasn't been great. This rushing attack has really been buoyed by the fact that Patrick Mahomes has just kind of had this like renewed emphasis on running this year. He's got 250 rushing yards. He's got 4 rushing touchdowns. And then over the last month, we've started to see Smith get more involved. It was as a pass catcher initially. He's hauled in at least 3 receptions in each of his past 4 outings. And then in week 7, and we will put all the caveats in the world on this one, because like we said Monday, I don't think we can look at that week 7 game against the Raiders where they got completely blown out. Kansas City did whatever they wanted. We can't look at those numbers and just think that that's going to project forward, right? Because a lot of guys got some garbage time work, got some extra stuff. But 14 carries for 39 yards for Smith, caught 5 passes for 42 yards. Even before it became a blowout, he was involved in that backfield. So that was great. It was also nice that when a rookie gets that increased volume, to see him producing on it, that's great too. And you think back to, can he be maybe a Jerick McKinnon light in this offense? A guy who could be a RB3 flex option. If he finds the end zone, could bump up to RB2 value for you. That's the recommendation here with him. He's somebody that you could put in your lineup. Kareem Hunt did get banged up in that game as well, not practicing to start the week. Their first practice was on Thursday today when we're recording this. They play Monday night, so we're going to have to follow that one over the next couple days. But if Kareem Hunt were out, that would only push Brashard Smith even further up the rankings. But right now I'm looking at him as like an RB3 flex. If Hunt were out, I'd have him very firmly as probably a top 30 back this week in fantasy, and a guy who I think his role is going to grow, and he could be a useful piece for you, not just this week, but moving forward in your lineup.
I like that call. He's held a nice role for this team, and I'm just really curious to see if they do put more and more on his plate. I will say, if there's no Kareem Hunt on Monday Night Football, Isaiah Pacheco is definitely going to make a case for getting out of the coping corner, which unfortunately we're going to tape that segment before Monday's game, but we will see how that one goes. I'll talk a little bit about Isaiah Davis on this list of players you have here. You have Tajay Spears, Brashard Smith, Sean Tucker, and Isaiah Davis. Davis is really interesting. We talked about him yesterday with Joel Smith on Buzz's Building, and Davis is somebody I think can actually play a little bit. We've seen him step in for Breece Hall previously and have a nice game. We don't right now know the full injury status with Breece Hall, but even if Hall is active and he's playing, I think they still might need a change of pace there. And like I mentioned, Davis, I think, can play in the run game and the pass game, so you might get some receptions there with him. Tyrod Taylor, who obviously is also dealing with the knee injury. We expect him to start, but he is dealing with the knee injury. Aaron Glenn labeled it as something he's been dealing with for a while. I think he's a little bit more likely to take the checkdowns than Justin Fields is, although Fields has been a bit of a checkdown. It's the Jets are just so hard to say at this point. But I also think that this offensive line is still good. It's a good matchup against Cincinnati, so you'd have to be in a pretty tough spot to go to the Jets RB2 if Breece Hall is active, but I certainly think he's a good stash candidate right now.
Yeah, of all the offenses, like we're talking about the Colts and wanting to grab a piece of them, or even the Ravens with Lamar back and stuff. Obviously, the Chiefs are a great offense to invest in. The Jets, maybe not so much, but Davis just has so many ways towards paying off. It's a good matchup. Like you said, he could get used out there even alongside Breece Hall. And then, yeah, there's the whole possibility that Breece Hall could get traded and that Davis, with Braylon Allen out until late in the year, maybe the rest of the year, that Davis could be like a surprising starter at some point in fantasy. That's another reason to grab him and stash him, or grab him and potentially use him this week. Yeah, for sure. All right. So at tight end, I only have 3 here. Juwan Johnson, Dalton Schultz, and Noah Fant. I think they're all interesting for a bunch of different reasons. I'm going to go back to the Texans. I'm going to say Schultz here because of those injuries, because the uncertainty with the receiving core, because they might lean on Braxton Berrios. And that for that reason, they might have to throw to Dalton Schultz a whole bunch. And the last couple of weeks, we've seen him step up 5 catches for 60 yards in week 5 before the bye, 9 catches for 98 yards this past week. And if Collins and Kirk are out, I think there is a good chance that Schultz could make a case to be a low-end tight end 1 in this game because of the volume he could command. At worst, a strong tight end 2 streamer. The 49ers defense too, which is his matchup this week, not quite as scary as they would have been, right? The Fred Warner injury kind of changes everything there. You look at what they've done against tight ends this year. The last couple of weeks, they've allowed at least 50 yards to each starting tight end they've faced. So that's another feather in the cap for Schultz there. Just monitor him as well, because I don't know why the Texans are so badly bitten by the injury bug here, but Schultz to start the week dealing with back and shoulder issues that kept him limited in practice. I didn't see their practice report yet today, but we'll make sure that he's going to be out there. If he is a very good streamer, and I'm using him as a bye week fill-in in a couple spots. So that tells you that I believe in him as a play this week.
You believe in him. You believe in Dalton Schultz. That's what you're telling the people out there. You're a Dalton
a
Schultz
streamer,
bro.
not as a rest of season tight end 1 starter in your lineup, but as a week 8 streamer with all these injuries in the receiving core. I believe in him as long as he's healthy.
That's well, you know why his back is. Yeah, that's where we're at. You know why his friggin' back is hurt, bro? Because they had to throw him 10 targets. When's the last time Dalton Schultz has gotten 10 targets in a game? I mean, God, it's got to have been since the Dallas days. So he was not ready for that level of volume. I'll tell you that. But that again just goes to show with the state of their receiver room right now, and for whatever Nick Caley is doing on offense. He's been a priority player. Yeah, he caught 9 passes in that game against the Seattle Seahawks. His previous high with the Texans the last 2 years was 5. So a lot of usage for Dalton Schultz, more than we're used to. That's why his back is hurting. All right, I will talk about Noah Fant here, who plays in the Joe Flacco Firefest offense right now for the Cincinnati Bengals. He was 3rd in terms of route participation last week against Pittsburgh Steelers. 98% for Jamar Chase, 90% for T. Higgins. And then it was Noah Fant and Andre Yoshivas tied at 76% for next. So with no Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant can go in there. He can play inline. He can also move around a little bit. 20.4% snaps in the slot, 24.5% snaps out wide. So he can do, again, the traditional inline tight end stuff, but he can also actually move around the formation a little bit. It's a good matchup against a Jets defense that's likely to not have Sauce Gardner. So Fant is definitely someone who scored a touchdown last week. I think you can chase as a potential tight end streamer this week as well.
Yeah, in the games, there were 3 full games that he's played with either Joe Burrow or Joe Flacco. He scored 2 touchdowns during those games, and he has at least 4 catches in all of those games. So not to, take another shot at Jake Browning here. And of course, Gesicki was out there. Some things have changed along the way. But yeah, when he's gotten decent quarterback play in this offense, he has been able to produce. So he was somebody else. I really strongly debated talking about him there. He is certainly on the streamer radar, and I wrote him up in my deep stashes column today as well. So people can go check that one out. There's a few other players in that one that I think might fit this category as well, of players that you could pick up and potentially start this week, if not hold them as stashes.
Yeah, you debated talking about him, but then you remembered you're a Dalton Schultz truther, so you had to go for the Dalton Schultz call out there.
Order the Dalton Schultz jersey. Yeah, let's go.
How many of those do you think they've sold so far? Being totally disrespectful to a great pro in Dalton Schultz. But anyways, let's move to your third question here, which is about the position we did not cover. You have a list of quarterbacks here to go over. Let's just list them all off and give me a couple that you actually really like here.
Well, it's become like our weekly check-in on the backups who are starting at quarterback, because there have been so many this year. But this week we're looking at Marcus Mariota at the Chiefs. Joe Flacco, obviously, I mean, we can just put him in, I think, as the starter for the rest of the season. Tyrod Taylor, it seems likely that Tyrod's going to be the starter this week, and yet we're going to have to monitor that one because he's dealing with an injury right now, and they haven't said that for sure that he's going to play. Mac Jones might get one more week here as the starter if Brock Purdy can't go, which a lot of the beat writers seem to be suggesting that Purdy's not going to be ready yet. Andy Dalton, I think he is likely to start here against the Bills. Bryce Young not practicing right now with the ankle injury. Andy Dalton getting another chance like he did last year to get some starts. And then just one that I'm putting on everybody's radar is Kirk Cousins. And Michael Penix Jr. is practicing, but he is dealing with an injury right now. So if by chance they decide not to play him, maybe we could see Kirk Cousins get out there. And Michael Penix Jr. hasn't really done anything like super, super exciting. So it wouldn't be crazy if they don't think he's 100% to maybe sit him down and let Kirk Cousins have a start. And I'm sure Kirk Cousins would love that as well, because he'd be going up against the Dolphins, which who doesn't want to face the Dolphins right now? So whichever quarterback for the Falcons plays this week, you might want to consider as a streamer. I think that offense is going to have some success. But, Marcus Mariota is the obvious guy here that you look at, because when he's gotten opportunities this year or in the past to fill in for Jaden Daniels, he's been really, really good. This is a very tough spot for him, though, right? You're going to Kansas City allowing the fourth fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this year. We're not totally sure whether Terry McLaurin or Deebo Samuel are going to play. They're back practicing, though, so hopefully those guys will be out there. And then it's a weird situation, because will we know on Sunday whether those guys are playing or not? Fingers crossed we do. But if they're practicing all week, if they're still coming back from the injury, will we get something definitive? Fully practicing is a great sign. And then you question, is the team going to rush these guys back with Mariota play? Who knows, right? There's a lot of variables that we're going to have to consider. But if all these guys are out there, Mariota gives you 70, 80% of what Jaden Daniels can at times. So he's a guy to certainly consider. But I will say this entire list is all guys that you're just considering as QB2 streamers or worse. No one on this list of backups is going to step right into your lineup and have a huge week and win your week or anything like that. This is another version of, we're just trying to get through the BYE-mageddon. We're trying to find some guys in deeper leagues that you can grab and get in your starting lineup and just get you through so you can get a win and move on.
I will just say on Marcus Mariota, I think if those guys are close, Deebo and Terry, they're going to play those guys, because they're a little bit behind the eight ball right now. They don't look in a great spot in terms of making the NFL playoffs this year. And they need those guys out there to win, to try to win this game, because not only are they in Kansas City for this one, they get Seattle in week 9, Detroit in week 10. Then they got to go to Spain and take on the Dolphins. So you hope that they could beat that one. And then it's their week 12 bye. You don't want to drop 3 games to Chiefs, Seahawks, Lions before you go to freaking Europe and play the Dolphins and then go on your bye, because then your season's probably over at that point. The NFC is way too competitive. So I think if Deebo and Terry are close, they're playing. And again, I could be saying this because I have Jaden Daniels on 2 very important teams of mine this year, and I've picked up Marcus Mariota already, and just all right, well, I'm right. This is my plan A. Maybe I go with the plan B at some point, but Mariota, I know that the last game we saw him was terrible. He threw that pick 6 right away against Dallas, but that was without Terry, and I think that's a big part of this. Terry being there is big. Terry and Mariota have had a good connection when he's played previously, but no Terry, no Deebo. This offense is just kind of DOA. So I do think that Mariota, if those guys are healthy, he's been a good fantasy starter previously.
Yeah, agreed. I will say, if I'm picking from this list, and again, I don't necessarily consider Flacco a backup anymore, because I don't know if Joe Burrow is going to be back this year or not, but Flacco to me would be the play here. And we saw it last week, right? He has a fairly high ceiling. The matchup with the Jets, not that scary. We'll see if Sauce Gardner can play this week. So if I had to pick from those guys, Flacco, the one that maybe I want you to talk me down on a little bit is if Tyrod Taylor is out there this week. And I know on paper, the Jets have had some good spots and not come through this year. But if Tyrod Taylor's healthy, and if he is the one that gets named the starter, he looks kind of interesting. I'm going to want to rank him probably higher than I should, because you look at Cincinnati, giving up multiple passing touchdowns to 5 of the last 6 quarterbacks they've faced. They're the 7th easiest matchup here. I know Garrett Wilson's not out there, but it still seems like a spot where Tyrod Taylor could potentially give you, around quarterback 15 kind of numbers. Am I being foolish? Am I buying in too much to the math and the matchup and all that sort of stuff versus the reality, which is this is the dysfunctional Jets who don't have Garrett Wilson, don't go anywhere near it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. If the Garrett Wilson was playing, I'd be totally down with what you're saying. They just have no playmakers. They have nothing in that receiving room without Garrett Wilson. So that just makes it really tough. And the whole offense this year is set up basically to weaponize Garrett Wilson as the number one receiver. You can see with what they're doing from a conceptual standpoint. It's just, again, without him, they have really nothing going on there. And I believe they're on their bye next week, right? So there's a chance that, like, why would they not just hold him out? No, yes, they are on their bye in week 9. So yeah, why would they just not hold him out one more week? Mason Taylor not practicing on Thursday as well. So that's even worse. I don't know. Man. To me, I just, yeah, I don't know.
Maybe that seals the deal then. If Mason Taylor's banged up, then there's no reason. All right.
Which, again, talk about banged. How banged are you if it's like, well, your second-round rookie tight end can't play, your offense is sunk. But, yeah, I do think that Tyrod with Garrett Wilson and with Mason Taylor, I'd be interested. But, yeah, again, I had to weigh, like, do I want to pick up Mariota or do I want to play Tyrod Taylor? I just went ahead and got Mariota even before the news that Jaden Daniels was officially out. So I'm with you there. Two last notes on your list here before we throw to break. One, Mac Jones we'll talk about a little bit later because this 49ers team is going to come up later. But the other one I would just say Andy Dalton. I'm at least open to the idea maybe Bryce plays. I was looking at my buddy Joe Person from The Athletic, covers the teams, covered the Panthers forever. I was looking at his Twitter feed today, and like he's got a picture of Bryce walking onto the practice field yesterday without a limp, holding his helmet. He's got a video of him running at the practice field. So I think this team, there's like a weird narrative in the fantasy community that like, oh yeah, Andy Dalton might make this offense better. I don't think the Panthers agree with that at all. I think they really want Bryce Young to play in this game, but it's at least just worth tracking over the rest of the week because they did add Mike White to the team as well. So we'll see how that goes. But just wanted to make a note of that here, and when we're talking about these bye week backups, that we might actually see Bryce get back out there, but I would say the odds are probably that we see Andy Dalton. All right, we got to go on a quick break here. When we come back, we have more questions to hit for a packed Week 8 slate. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we are back. We're continuing to preview Week 8 in the NFL. Boone, we're still stuck on your 6-pack of questions here. I think we're on number 4. Can I count? I was told there would be no counting. All right, you better start talking here, buddy, before my brain explodes.
All right, I didn't really frame this as a question, but I guess we can here. Is Aaron Rodgers going to have a big revenge game against the Packers? And I know some people kind of scoff at the revenge narrative, but we have a very clear example of this working this year. That was back in week 1 when Rodgers just outright admitted that he wanted to beat his old team, the Jets, because of how things went there. And I just think it stands to reason that he's also going to want to beat the team that he spent most of his career with, who basically just moved on from him, right? They drafted Jordan Love. We saw him get mad about that, and that I think fueled him to go out and win back-to-back MVPs. Now he gets a chance to face off against Love, against the Packers, and it just so happens that the 41-year-old quarterback played on Thursday night last week. So he's got a few extra days to rest up, right? And oh, by the way, he had 4 touchdowns in that game. And when did he also have 4 touchdowns? That revenge game against the Jets. And he just seems like the kind of guy that could be motivated by something like this. And I like it. I mean, I kind of feel the same way. I don't blame him at all that he would want to go out there and stick it to the Packers. And I think he can. Green Bay, certainly a tough matchup, but they've let 4 of the last 5 quarterbacks that they've faced throw for multiple touchdowns. All 4 of those guys finished as top 14 fantasy quarterbacks those weeks. So Rodgers, to me, is a decent streamer in this one. And then you just go down the list, right? DK Metcalf, he'll go along for the ride. I think he's a borderline wide receiver 1. And again, not the easiest matchup, but we've seen Jamar Chase put up 10 for 94 and 1 against the Packers. George Pickens, 8 for 134 and 2. Deebo Samuel, 7 for 44 and 1. So it's not like they're a complete shutdown unit. And then there's so much more you could talk about the Steelers. Calvin Austin's probably going to be back for this game, so that only helps Rodgers, gives him a potential real number 2 target because they haven't had anybody really step up in that receiving core behind DK Metcalf. And then I don't really know what to do with the tight ends. It's 3 guys. It's almost 4 guys because Hayward gets involved and catches the odd touchdown. But it's mostly the 3 in Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth came to life last time out. And then Darnell Washington as well. They all caught touchdowns in that game. I would look at it and just say that I think Jonnu Smith is the only one that I'd be willing to stream for fantasy. Pat Freiermuth, I know he had a good game last week, but it seems very risky chasing that one because he hadn't topped 31 yards in a game before week 7. So I know he caught the long one. I know he had 2 touchdowns, but very difficult, I think, to just throw him in your lineup. And yet, any given week, any one of those tight ends can get there. So that's why I hate ranking tight ends. It's by far the least accurate position I am at ranking, Harmon.
I mean, you and everybody else in the world, man. Just on the Freiermuth note, 71% route participation last week, which was a season high. I tweeted this during the game. It was oh yeah, the Steelers remembered they have this very good receiving tight end in Pat Freiermuth. And I know he's not the perfect blocker and all that stuff, whatever, but he was 3rd on the team in routes. And he's the 2nd tight end. Jonnu Smith was ahead of him. That's just classic Arthur Smith. I know that. But still, Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, Ben Skoranek, these guys are rotating. None of them are running around on more than 55% of the dropbacks. So we'll see. I have no idea if that Freiermuth play and playing time is going to be sticky, but it's something I at least want to track in this game because we're always looking for talented players at this position. And obviously I think we know he's a good player. Back to the Aaron Rodgers revenge game idea. Can we bring that Brooke Pryor, quote up again here that we had earlier? Cause I actually watched this segment in the locker room at the gym, actually, because it was on the TV, this interview where they were talking to Rodgers, and he said he doesn't view Sunday as a revenge game. He said, quote, "There's no animosity toward the organization. Obviously, I wish things had been better than our last year. But yeah, I don't know, Boone. I'm going to try to play armchair psychologist with Aaron Rodgers, which is a dangerous game. But you're a happily married man. I'm a happily married man. Follow me on this analogy here. Take yourself out of that perspective a little bit here. Being happily married, right? Sometimes when you have a falling out in a relationship, right? Which I think that Aaron Rodgers and the Jets had a bad falling out. He was pretty clearly pissed about the way that ended. Talked about it on McAfee. I think he felt very why'd you fly me out here to have this meeting and close the door? He talked about the whole thing. Everybody's seen that. But sometimes when you have that real bad breakup, what you'd be like, you know what? My ex wasn't that bad. Things actually were good. We had some good times between the two of us. We had some good moments. Yeah, it's over, and Rodgers himself said this, absence makes the heart grow fond. So if you're trying to push down the Aaron Rodgers revenge game narrative, He said that, and also I would I'd note too, big difference between the team he played last week in terms of how they can pressure the quarterback and the team he's going to play this week. So if you're looking for reasons to not stream Aaron Rodgers, I've just given you a couple. Boone gave you some. I'm going to give you a couple of why it might not work out this week.
I mean, even if you are going to go with that analogy, don't you still want to like look really good for your? Don't you want that? Even if if you have fond memories of them, don't you still want them to look at you and go, man, what if we had kept him all these years? Everything might have worked out. Everything might have been fine. I think Rodgers has that in him still. Even if he feels good about Green Bay, I still think he'd like to go out there, have a big game against them, and make them question, like, hey, should you have even ever moved on from me, or could I have spent my entire career there? I think that's what's in the back of his mind.
At the very least, if you, God, what was that movie? Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, is it with Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling? A movie I've actually seen before. At the end of the movie, when they like give each other a look across the bar, like they're never going to be together, but you want to look good for that moment. You want to look good for La La Land, not Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Yeah, La La Land, great movie. One of the movies I've actually seen. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, different movie that I haven't seen actually. Now that I think about it. All right, let's move on. We got another revenge game here to talk about for your fifth topic of the week, Boone. And please, God, let's talk about that as opposed to my movie viewing habits.
Yeah, the one that's getting overshadowed a little bit probably by the Rodgers and Green Bay thing, but Javonte Williams at the Broncos, right? Like he's also getting an opportunity here, and there might not be as much animosity. There might not be as long of a career or success or anything like that. And yet still, he's going to have a shot here to go back and put up a big total potentially because he has been having a fantastic season, right? So few people, I think present company included, did not see this coming at all. He is a top 10 fantasy back. 5 of his 7 outings this year, he's got touchdowns. He's the RB7 in fantasy points per game this year, at least 100 scrimmage yards 4 times this season. The dude is absolutely balling, and now he's going to get a chance to show his old squad in Denver what he can do. The only problem is Denver's got a pretty good defense on their side, right? So it's going to be a tough matchup for him. They haven't allowed a running back to get over 60 rushing yards on them since week 3. Only 4 touchdowns to running backs all year. Just 2 of those came on the ground. Denver's favored in this game. I think there could be a lot of points in this one, even though that Broncos defense is solid, because we've seen the Cowboys been able to put points basically up on everybody. They have a ton of weapons in their offense. But yeah, I think this is going to be a good shot for Javonte, who's been active as a pass catcher. He's caught a lot of balls, hasn't been really productive, hasn't put up a ton of yardage with those, but he has a lot of ways that he can produce here. And with some bye weeks, I know it feels weird to say this about a guy going up against the Broncos defense, but I think he's in like the low end RB1 conversation this week. Normally, if everyone was out there, he would be an RB2, but there's just a bunch of guys on bye, and I think you got to move him up a little bit.
Are you sure he's an RB2 even when everybody else is out there? Like, I'm looking at my running back rankings
in this matchup, not in a regular week, but I'm saying going against the Broncos in this matchup, I would probably have him outside of the top 12, but because of all the guys on bye, we're moving him up just a little bit. But no, most weeks, like I said, he's the RB7 on the season. I think I've had him ranked inside my top 10 as long as he's not going against like a shutdown defense. He's been inside my top 10 pretty much every week for the last month plus, right? Since we kind of realized what he was doing and it wasn't just a mirage after the first couple of weeks.
No, I see what you're saying. I think, he'd probably be, if we were redrafting right now, I think I'd probably rank him as maybe like my 7th running back, 6th maybe. I don't know. I'd have to really sit down and think about it. But he's definitely he's a good. I think the pass catching for him is still something that can keep him afloat in this matchup, and goal line opportunities, the whole deal. And I do think Javonte wants to go to Denver or go against Denver and really put something on him there. I think he wants to go into Denver and have like a good game. I think he can say that it was mutual, the departure, but they wanted to move on from him, and I definitely think that he will want to go back and have a good moment there. But all right, I think we got it. Well, let's get to your last question here of the week, which is a really good topic.
Yeah, I mean, the last one is I'm looking at some players here who could break out the rest of the season. We've had enough time now to get a feel for everything. So who's one player at every position for fantasy who could break out the rest of the year? And we can go through them. I have Caleb Williams at quarterback, Woody Marks at running back, Travis Hunter at wide receiver, and Kyle Pitts at tight end. For Caleb, he hasn't been consistent this season, right? He's still missing throws. he still looks uncomfortable at times, I would say. He just came up short for fantasy managers in what should have been a pretty good matchup against the Saints. They're allowing the 10th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Didn't come through in that game. But this next stretch, it's going to tell the story on his season, because remember, Monday when we had people asking whether they should panic about Roma Dunze, I brought up the incredible schedule that's about to happen for the Bears here. The Ravens, the Bengals, and the Giants, they're all top 7 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks this year. So if Caleb is going to be that difference maker in fantasy this season, and I still think he can be that guy, he has to take advantage of these matchups. He's had enough time in this Ben Johnson system to just blow up when he gets these kind of opponents. I think he's going to go out and do that. He's a top 10 option for me in all of these games, and I think that's going to propel him to a really strong finish the rest of the season.
I like this call. Caleb Williams, we talked about this yesterday in the fantasy film room with Nate. He is one of these guys that is right now one of the best quarterbacks when working against man coverage, actually the best quarterback right now statistically against man coverage, adjusted yards per attempt, EPA per dropback. But he falls back to close to the bottom 10, if not in the bottom 10, when he's working against zone coverage, which I think is actually really instructive with his game right now, because number one, his guy, Roma Dunze, is a man coverage beater. So you know, no shock there that he's been really good against man, because that's the guy he's feeding, that's the guy he's throwing to. But also I think Caleb has just turned down some throws working over the middle of the field against zone coverage. I think it's not where he's most comfortable. I also think his inaccuracy can show up a little bit when he's throwing off platform into zone coverages, stuff like that. So, but also I would say too, the fact that they're getting this run game going now, this is what these coordinators like Ben Johnson want to do. They want to build their pass game off of their run game, especially the play action heavy quarterbacks. So for Caleb, if he can get more efficient because the run game is better, working on the play action, taking those shots over the middle against zone coverage, if also guys like Colson Loveland and Luther Burden emerge, who are probably going to be better zone beaters in your offense than your top guy in Rome, who's your man beater, I think there's ways where those can level out. And in that case, we can definitely see Caleb be a really strong fantasy quarterback rest of the way.
Yeah, the tools are there. The system is there. I think you're making a great point about the running game coming along and the whole thing just kind of gelling over time. But yes, the running game coming along takes a lot of stress off of him if they can have that success on the ground and be efficient there. And who knows if it's going to continue. They've had that success recently in these upcoming matchups. I think they're going to be able to run the ball as well. So I think they can keep that going. And it just seems to me like it's only a matter of time before Caleb gets this done for fantasy. In real life, I think he's still got a lot of things he's got to work on, but fantasy-wise, production-wise, we're going to see it in these 3 games, and hopefully that lets him kind of have that as like a trampoline the rest of the way that just kind of vaults him along. Now, at running back, if you're willing to move on here, we can talk about Woody Marks. And this one's so weird because normally you look at things like, a player breaking out and a good offense and a team that's going to be in the lead a whole bunch, with positive game scripts for their running back, or some really easy matchups like we just talked about for Caleb Williams. And in this one, it's so strange because it's kind of the opposite for Woody Marks, right? It's kind of clear to me that Nick Chubb just doesn't have a lot left in the tank. And no, in terms of his usage in this offense, I don't think we feel great about the Texans offensive line necessarily, about, Nick Haley and how coming out of the bye, and that's all they were able to muster. That wasn't very inspiring. And yet you go back to a few weeks ago and we had that big game from Woody Marks, week 4 against the Titans, 21 touches, 119 yards, 2 touchdowns. It seemed like that might be a takeover week. And then the week after they had that weird blowout game where they faced the Ravens and they just dominated. And they went back to Chubb. They leaned on Chubb in that one late in the game. They got some other backs involved as well. And it became kind of clear that Woody Marks isn't going to be the guy if they have, and they're not going to have many of them, these really, really overly positive game scripts. He's the guy when it's going to be close. He's the guy when they're going to be trailing. And that's what I think this team is going to be doing more often than not, right? So we saw this week when it was a closer game, when they fell behind, Marks gets 13 touches, Chubb only gets 6. And yes, Marks didn't do that much in terms of yards in that game. It was a tough matchup against the Seahawks, but he finds the end zone as a pass catcher. We talked earlier about the Texans' injuries at receiver and other guys maybe at other positions having to step up, like a Dalton Schultz at tight end. Well, maybe they're going to have to lean on their running back a little bit more, get him involved in the passing game as well. So I think Marks is the guy to roster in this backfield. I don't think the ceiling here is necessarily a league winner, but I think he could be a low-end RB2, that high-end RB3. The guy, as long as they don't trade for anyone too, I will mention, because Breece Hall has been thrown out there. They've been mentioned as a potential landing spot, so that could blow this whole thing up. But if they continue with the guys they have on the roster, Woody Marks looks like he is going to be the guy that's going to get more work the rest of the season. And with the kind of work that he's gotten in 2 of the last 3 games, I think he could be a productive fantasy player.
I just really need this Texans team, which I can't believe we're talking about the Texans so much. This has been like hate on the Texans week on the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast and Football 301, and yet somehow we're like, oh, Woody Marks might break out rest of the way. But I think that's going to take like as much as I talked about Jalen Noel in the second half of that game actually getting used the way he should be and getting the playing time. So did Woody Marks, to your point, and it's going to take Nick Caley and D'Amico Ryan seeing what happened in the second half of that game and bringing that back on a weekly basis, because we need to see that more going forward. So I can buy this case a little bit, but I can buy your next breakout pick, which is the wide receiver that you're going to talk about. So I'm glad to see, Justin Boone, you have Travis Hunter here as your wide receiver pick. So let's hear it. What's the case?
Well, I will reiterate again. You said this on Monday's show that a couple weeks ago, you stopped me from wanting to put Travis Hunter into coping corner on the panic meter, just because I was so frustrated with him not producing, him not really getting the opportunity. But you said there's a chance this could turn. There's a chance that they could start to give him a little bit more. And that's what we're seeing happen. Now, we also saw Brian Thomas Jr. get hurt last week, and Hunter went off late in that game. So there's a lot of things to factor in, but 8 for 101 and a touchdown, plays a season high 87% of the snaps. It was a lot of garbage time in terms of his production, and there was that BTJ injury, but it looked good. And everything that they're saying, they're on bye this week, is very positive about how they're going to use Hunter the rest of the way. We don't know about the injury for BTJ yet. He could come back fine in week 9. It's a shoulder issue. We'll have to monitor that one, but there are some indications from Liam Cohen himself that they want to get Travis Hunter more involved, that they want to get him more looks as the primary receiver, and also that coming out of the bye, the quote from him is that they want to use, I'm paraphrasing, but they want to use their best 11 out there. And that to me really is an indication that Travis Hunter is going to get more work, because he is certainly one of their best 11, probably on both sides of the ball. Now, coming out of the bye, they got a nice matchup against the Raiders. I think that could be a really good spot for him. And we know that he's a talented player. He is still developing. If they're willing to scheme him up a little more, if they're willing to give him more opportunity on offense, which by all indications seems to be the way this is going, then that breakout is definitely possible. And there is still a non-zero chance that he becomes that number 1 receiver in the offense over BTJ at some point this season or for the rest of this season. So when new information presents itself, you got to adapt. That's what I'm doing. I think it was a very much out of frustration a few weeks ago that I wanted to put him into the coping corner. I'm glad that you talked me out of that. And I think now we have a really good shot to see him have that breakout in the second half of the year.
Well, I think what you were doing there was you were adjusting to new information that the Jaguars had been giving us at the time, which was, they weren't making him a priority player on the offensive side of the football. And I think that was where your frustrations and the idea that he might be a coping corner candidate were coming from. And I totally understand that. At the same time, though, he was starting to trend up on the offense, which is, for me, I was like, okay, let's just try to leave out one more week of hope. And thank God we got it. I mean, the 100-yard game, the first touchdown. And yeah, I mean, they were definitely behind in the second half, but people can miss me with, it was just in garbage time all week. Like, I watched that film. It's not like the Rams were just like, run by me, Travis Hunter, no problem, no big deal. And meanwhile, the Broncos came back with 33 points in the fourth quarter. Like, anything can happen in an NFL game. You don't just give up in an NFL game. And I actually think that the more important thing is that he was running more downfield, real routes this past week. And yeah, you mentioned the quote from Liam Cohen, best 11 on offense. Travis Hunter is easily one of their best 11 players, if not their best pass catcher right now. Drops are not everything, right? Drops are, in fact, like a noisy sometimes overemphasized statistic with wide receivers. But Travis Hunter right now is literally their only wide receiver that does not have a drop rate over 10% this year. So it's like, I think he's their most comfortable receiver working over the middle right now. So I think they're going to have to get him ramped up. I could see him going from a guy that you hated that you drafted in the first half of the season to a guy that you're starting maybe every single week. So I like him out him as the wide receiver pick there.
Yeah, coming out of the bye in that matchup, I think we're looking at him as like a wide receiver 3 flex option and a guy who has a much higher ceiling, especially if BTJ isn't 100% or if BTJ misses time. So we'll factor all that in when they do return from the bye in week 9. And then the last guy on the list here at tight end, Kyle Pitts. And here we are again, Harmon. We're back to Kyle Pitts,
again.
But hear me out. All right. He's finished as a top 15 fantasy tight end in half of his games this year. All right. The best part of his schedule is only just beginning. In week 8, he's taken on the Dolphins. They give up the 10th most fantasy points to his position. If you include Miami, his next 9 opponents, all plus matchups for fantasy tight ends. 6 of them are inside the top 10 in fantasy points allowed to tight ends. He is a low-end tight end 1 this week, and I think he's going to be a low-end tight end 1 the rest of the way, and you could probably get him for tight end 2 prices because so many people over the years have been burned by him in fantasy, and you got some other younger guys coming on at the moment. So if you're looking for tight end help and you're looking for it on the cheap, I think you could go trade for Kyle Pitts, and I think he is going to be a pretty good starter for you, at least for the next 9 weeks, let's say.
I mean, what's the Thanos line? You couldn't live with your failure. Where'd that bring you? Back to me. And that's Kyle Pitts right now. I thought
me, baby. I am inevitable. Kyle Pitts is inevitable.
Wow, he is.
That's the one we're going.
Talking about Kyle Pitts, yeah, it's definitely inevitable. But right now in the NFL, the tight end who has run the highest run around in the highest percentage of his team's dropbacks is Trey McBride at 93%. Number 2 is Kyle Pitts at 91%. So that is a variables have changed here. It's no longer like, oh, he's not on the field consistent. Like, no, the guy is out there. He is on 81% of the snaps for the Falcons right now, and he's been targeted on 19% of his routes. He's not been crazy efficient, but I also think this is an offense, Boone, that is kind of searching for different answers, right? They're having issues with man coverage. The Darnell Mooney stuff's been a little hit or miss. The Michael Penix stuff has been a little hit or miss. They're still trying to figure out what to do with this whole unit. And part of that could be like, all right, let's find different ways to get Kyle Pitts activated. So yeah, I think for the first time in probably a couple of years now, I'm open to the Pitts stuff just because I think he's looking better too, which is a key part of this variable. So we couldn't do a fantasy breakout segment without talking Kyle Pitts. I think it's like legally required, even if you're doing it in the middle of the season. So those are some really good candidates from Boone. I like all 4 of those guys to varying degrees. So I think those are all some good picks for potential breakouts the rest of the season. All right, with that, we're going to get to our next break. When we come back, we have our literally no one's games of the week to get into. We'll do that right after this. All right, we're back. It's time. Welcome to my literally no one's games of the week. It's so hard to get fired up about a segment when the last thing you hear is the yawn. But let me tell you what, we got some snooze-worthy games this week, that's for sure. Starting with this first one, Cleveland Browns at New England Patriots. Literally no one's games of the week. The Patriots have actually been in this segment a lot, Boone. I avoided the Titans game this week. Couldn't do it anymore. No more Titans for a minute. What are we going to say?
You're looking for a thank you from me, but sure, I'll throw a thank you out there for avoiding the Titans in this one. Yeah.
Yes, I no, I'm looking for you. You pointed it out, so I actually think I need to thank you for pointing it out that I keep talking about the Titans on this show. So yes, I think I owe you the thank you. But no, the Patriots have actually weirdly been in here a lot, which I think goes to show that they have had a really easy schedule so far. If we're being generous to and just accurate to how things have gone for the Patriots, it's been a pretty easy schedule. Now they beat your Bills, so it's kind of like, all right, well, the biggest game of the season they showed up in, and Drake May played really well, and Stephon Diggs was awesome, and they won the game. So they haven't played anybody yet. Haters can kind of shut up. But from a fantasy standpoint, this is a tough matchup for Drake May. I think that's the most interesting thing to talk about here is that the Browns defense puts a lot on you. They get after the quarterback. And I think Drake May has played fan-freaking-tastic football. He's been efficient. He's been careful with the ball. He's also been the perfect blend of efficient, but also a playmaker, pushing it down the field. So what do we think about Drake May and some of these passing game weapons in this matchup, Boone? It's probably the most tough one that they've faced for a while.
Yeah, I think it's smart to point this game out because, yeah, Cleveland just kind of like muddies most of these games, right? And they kind of become like unfun to watch depending what kind of football you like. But if you love fantasy stats, you're normally not going to get a ton out of these games with the Browns unless they're going against a very weak opponent and they're able to run up the score like we saw last week against Miami. I still believe in Drake May. Like you said, like going against the Bills, he came through. He's just kind of showing that I think he's matchup proof at this point, that he's able to find the open receiver. He's able to scramble and get yards. He feels very comfortable out there. And Josh McDaniels, for all the things people say about him, like he's doing a pretty good job as the OC there, right? Like that offense is humming.
He can coordinate an offense.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe you don't want him coaching your team, but definitely as an OC, he does a good job. And so, yeah, like we might take a little off the top of the projection this week for Drake May, but he's still somebody that I think you're going to play. I'm very worried about Ramondre Stevenson, who I think has, done very well this year. I mean, he's getting the majority of the work, much to the dismay of everyone who has TreVeyon Henderson on their team. But coming off a good game here for Ramondre, 90 scrimmage yards and a touchdown, just so much volume, so many snaps. I will say, he's producing in some of those easier matchups as well. You come into this one against the Browns, this is just going to be a problem. I think he's a guy that you want to think twice about playing this week because Ramondre's been held under 40 rushing yards in 5 of his 7 outings despite those easy matchups, but he's been finding the end zone. He's still been putting up decent fantasy stats where you can use him in your lineup most weeks. But the Browns, they allow the second fewest fantasy points to running backs, the 5th fewest rushing yards, the 3rd fewest rushing touchdowns. Like you can go on and on here. So this is not a spot, I don't think, to put your faith in Ramondre Stevenson. There will be spots to trust him. This is not one of them. I think he's just a touchdown or bust RB3 in this game. And TreVeyon Henderson, again, you are putting as far away from your lineup as you possibly can at the very back of your bench. Or I've had some people reach out and ask whether they'd be willing to drop him. I have said, depending on who your options are, you could consider dropping him. I know on Monday you were kind of preaching some caution there and saying, well, he's still a 1 injury away guy. If Ramondre goes down, his value could blow up. But the running game here is not going to get much going, which might put even more on Drake May. And I think he's capable of coming through.
My last note on this game too is just Kayshon Boutte. It's definitely a tougher matchup for him than the last 2 weeks, and I say this is someone that has started Kayshon Boutte the last 2 weeks. Would really like to start him again this week. I might have to just because of bye weeks, but it's a tougher matchup. Tyson Campbell, Denzel Ward on the outside. Stephon Diggs is the guy who gets to travel a little bit more into the slot than Kayshon Boutte, who's just a 6% slot player. So just something to note if you are making some bye week decisions there. Second game this segment, your Bills at Carolina facing the Panthers. Obviously, the Panthers are an intriguing team. Their run game is a subject of interest after Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard split work last week, where Rico was more efficient. That's not surprising. Chuba's coming off a calf injury. The Bills' run defense has been susceptible all year long, so I think you could play both Panthers backs in this matchup. Of course, we don't know who's playing quarterback. I don't think that really matters too much for McMillan. You're still going to play him regardless, trying to really not mess around too much farther down in their depth chart. And then from your Bills' perspective, Boone, coming off the bye, the Panthers' run defense has been really good of late, quietly been very good. And James Cook, I saw Ian Hartitz tweet this today. I don't think he's caught a pass all month. Obviously, they were on the bye week, but still, he has not been very involved in the passing game of late. So interested to see if his usage changes from a receiving standpoint, James Cook coming off the bye.
Yeah, this is one of those situations mentioning the Panthers run defense that I don't know that everyone's adjusted on this one. So it's good that you're calling it out because, yeah, they have gotten much better this season against the run. And in the past, they were somebody to target for running backs. Now, not so much. So I actually am bumping down James Cook's projection a little bit. Though I wonder coming off the bye here whether the Bills are going to adjust and get Cook more involved. I think they really should. I know there was all the talk from Joe Brady that they need to get the other backs involved and all that sort of stuff, but that is not the best version of this offense. The best version of this offense is James Cook in that backfield, and it's really unfortunate when they're trailing in games and the 2 minute where they start to bring these other guys in like a Ty Johnson. I think that's a mistake. They need James Cook's playmaking ability out there, especially when you have a receiving core that kind of lacks that true number one playmaker, though there's been some reports out there, some rumors that maybe we could see the Bills go out and get a receiver. I'm hoping that they do that. But yeah, I think this is a very strange matchup for Cook where we're going to have to factor in the strength of the Panthers run defense versus how much do we actually think they are going to give Cook more work coming out of the bye here. Still an RB1 for fantasy, but a very volatile matchup for him for sure.
Last game I want to talk about in this segment, San Francisco 49ers, Houston Texans. I can't believe the Texans are on the outline again. I don't know if I have the stomach to talk about the Texans any more than we already have, and I think we've hit all the important points. Yeah, exactly. We've hit all the important points of the Texans. So I think only Texans related thing is that Niners defense was awesome against the Falcons last week, which was one of the biggest surprises of the week after they've lost Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. They came out aggressive. They came out flying. They had a great plan against that Falcons offense. Do we see that again this week? I think it's not that the Texans are some great litmus test from an offensive standpoint, but it's at least worth tracking this game. The other thing I want to know, Boone, is two things actually. One, can the Niners replicate their run game performance of last week? Because if they're going to run the ball like that with some of those gap scheme concepts, Christian McCaffrey is just going to run away with the number one overall player in fantasy title no matter what because he's still getting the receiving usage. The other thing is I'm just tracking the Brock Purdy vibes check. Some of the reporters are starting to kind of rate. It's there's no consistency. Some are this might be another week. It might be a little bit longer. Then others are a little more optimistic. Purdy had some quotes to the Sunday Night Crew last week where he was just talking about how complicated this toe injury is. So I don't know. I feel like we're in every week. I'm like, all right, Purdy will get back this week, and then he doesn't come back. And I just wonder how long this goes. So that's kind of my general just not Niners vibe check. I mean, they're going to be good no matter what. It's a good offense, but just at least worth tracking here.
Yeah, it's weird that Purdy's been limited in practice. He's been out there and then they just kind of keep ruling him out. So yeah, I mean, I'm no medical expert. We rely on all the great injury analysts in the industry to give us information on these guys. It seems to me like he's probably not going to be back this week based on what I've seen. And that maybe next week would be a more likely option for him. And Mac Jones, I mean, for as well as he played a few weeks ago, hasn't necessarily had the same kind of success in the last couple of games, at least fantasy wise. But going back to the running game with Christian McCaffrey, I think what a big difference George Kittle back makes, right? And we always think about George Kittle as like this elite fantasy tight end, but what a killer blocker that dude is. And that's only going to help McCaffrey break more runs and put up more stats on the ground. And we saw it in Kittle's first game back. As much as he didn't come through for fantasy, don't worry, everybody. He will have bigger days. You want to go out and trade for George Kittle. If his manager right now is scared because he put up that 0 in his first game back after they waited for him, don't worry about that. You go out and you try to steal him away if you can in a trade right now, because he is going to be an elite fantasy tight end. He just has his ups and downs.
All right, we're going to take our final break. When we come back, we'll get into the hurry up offense right after this. All right, we're back, and it is time, the moment you've all been waiting for, where Boone and I answer rapid questions from the other, 40 seconds or less. Welcome to the Hurry Up Offense. All right, Boone, let's not mess around here. We got to get to these questions. I'll let you go first, as always.
All right, so we've been talking a bunch about revenge games and revenge this year, not just this week. Is there a player who would like to get revenge on Matt Harmon for his take on them at some point in your career? And if there is, who would it be?
The only player I know for sure has blocked me based on something I said about him was Cordero Patterson many years ago. I think I don't know if I
see Pat. Come on.
Yeah, CPAT blocked me, and I definitely earned it, so that's okay. Other players who might want some revenge on me, maybe, I don't know. I'm always right, though. That's the thing. No, I'm kidding. I'm not always right. I think Juju Smith-Schuster at times definitely would have wanted to get some revenge on me. I thought he was pretty overrated during his peak, so he would probably be number one. But we've met, and we had a nice chat, so I don't know. Maybe not.
Okay.
All right. My first question to you is, how high are you going to rank Devontae Smith if A.J. Brown does not play with his hamstring injury?
Well, not to throw cold water on this, but I think we did get some reports from the beat writers this afternoon that it's more just a rest thing, and it seems like he is going to play. We're going to have to wait until Friday, of course, to make sure that he's out there.
But let's play along
in the hypothetical scenario where A.J. Brown is not playing. It makes Devonta Smith right up there in the top 12, and I think you could argue top 10. He's been the more successful receiver this year. I think he's looked most of the time like the better receiver. And he's just a heck of a player. I think on a lot of teams, he could be the number one. And yet in that stacked Eagles offense, he ends up being this really overqualified number two. So He'd be a wide receiver 1 this week if for some reason AJ Brown can't go, but it seems like he will. Speaking of rankings, we don't have a ton of like major differences, and I'm hoping you haven't updated your rankings since I saw this, but one guy that we do have a pretty big split on is Xavier Legette. You had him at wide receiver 34 this afternoon. I had him at wide receiver 46. Would you like to make a case for me moving Legette up? I'm always going to look at your analysis as a good data point. Is there something I'm missing on Xavier Legette this week?
I don't know if that one's going to hold throughout the course of the week, but I did want to move him up from where he was like in the consensus rankings, because I do think people are just kind of ignoring the 9 catches from last week. And I do think Legette has something to him. And I am obviously very high on Jalen Coker. I think Jalen Coker played better than Legette in the long run in his rookie year, and I think he could be the better player in the long run. But right now, Coker's getting ramped back up. They talked about how he needed to get back into shape, and I would still say that the guy that's the favorite to run the second most routes on that team is Xavier Legette. And I think this offense is playing pretty well right now. So I think you could do worse from a bye week start perspective.
Sounds good.
I don't know if that was a great case, but it was something. All right. Speaking of you could do worse on bye weeks, what's the most disgusting start that you're likely going to have to make because of bye weeks?
Oh, God. There's so many bad ones, Harmon. I don't even want to admit. I have a dynasty team. I have a couple dynasty leagues where you start 5 receivers. So you can think about like how deep you have to go in those leagues. And I got guys on bye. I have like Devontae Adams and Travis Hunter on bye. I have Tyreek Hill hurt. So there is a league where like Van Jefferson we're going down to. The Bucks guy, I think I have Sterling Shepard, who I know we like, but that's not somebody you want to have to trust.
But that's leagues really, better really than bad. Van Jefferson.
Yeah, no, I mean, Van Jefferson at least had some games recently. Like, that's where it's gotten to, where you're on the waiver wire looking at guys. Like, it's not Braxton Berrios yet, but we're getting pretty close. All right, so there's no London games this week. There's no early morning Sunday game. There's no late night doubleheader Monday night football games. But I want to know, if you could build like the perfect week of NFL games in the schedule, how would you build it? Where would you put all the games? What's the ideal week look like for you schedule-wise?
You mean like timing of the like when
timing,
the games kick off?
How many games, when, and the days the games happen and the times the games are happening.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but no international games. No early games. I can deal with it. It's okay, but if we're talking about my ideal world, there's none of those. I do think we need to balance out the 1 a.m. to 4, the 1 p.m. to 4:30 start times.
Yes,
we need like a much closer to even. Just especially when there's bye weeks, it's such a slog to the end. And then one Sunday night game, one Monday night game. That's it. I honestly think the schedule is perfect. No changes.
Okay, very very straightforward.
All right. Yeah, you know me, I'm a straightforward guy. All right, my question to you. Would you rather quietly disappear from the public eye amid a banishment to a life of sea on a crab fishing ship, or finish dead last in the rankings contest and everyone knows about it?
This is incredible. You would never hear from me again, Harmon. I would be out at sea. I would be gone. I would do anything in my power to not finish last in that rankings contest. The competitive nature in me, I wouldn't talk to anyone anymore. I'd be gone adrift somewhere. That is absolutely my choice. Anything I could do, short of maybe, losing a limb, I will do it to make sure that I have success in that contest. And so far this year, it's working. I'm in 6th on the year right now, so I'm in the hunt to try to win it again. All right. Wow. I finished that one early. We got one more question to go here. A lot of good options. I always keep extras. If you had the power to do this, which retired NFL player would you bring back in their prime to play in today's game?
It can be just drop them on any team. It doesn't have to be the team they played for.
It doesn't have to be the team they played for. You are just picking any player in the history of the NFL. And we're going to probably lean fantasy wise. I don't know if you want to go with the defensive player, but you could. But any player that is retired, who are you bringing back? And if you want to give the team you'd put them on right now, that works too.
I would bring back. It's crazy because the guy hasn't been retired that long, but I would bring back Calvin Johnson in his rookie year and have him play somewhere else than the Lions in that dysfunctional era, because I'll just never forget it ended way too soon. I think he was burnt out, so like put him on the Rams right now and let's see what happens.
It's sad that like Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders might be the top two guys that come to mind when you think of that question. Both Lions players and just both phenomenal. Yeah, Calvin Johnson's a great one. Megatron all the way.
Yeah, well, the Lions fans now, they have something to be happy about. They're very happy. In fact,
sure.
like they're pretty chippy about how happy they are. So the shout out to them. They've got some good stuff going on for them, and I love watching that team. So, all right, that is going to do it for today's show. Shout out to you, Boone, another great program. I can't believe we learned how dedicated you are to the rankings contest, that you would disappear from the public eye completely. You're a fisherman for life, bro. You're going to die at sea rather than finishing last in the rankings contest.
I can't wait to tell my wife about that when we finish recording here.
Yes, I can't wait for you. I want you to report back to me what she said.
I will let you know. Yeah, she won't be surprised. Believe me, she will not be surprised.
We are going to 100% clip that, and I'm tweeting that out tomorrow or something, just to let the people know how dedicated you are to the damn rankings. So that is pretty incredible. Hell of a show here from you today, Boone. For those of you watching along with us, I know you're popping off in the YouTube chat specific questions. We have just the show for you tomorrow on this YouTube channel. John Daigle goes live for a Q&A at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific right here. He's here to answer all your fantasy questions. Look at that handsome face right there. Just dripping with knowledge is John Daigle. So make sure you check out that show in real time. We will be back. This show will be back on Sunday, the recap show with Chris Allen. We're going to be going live right as the late windows close there for those games. So when Cowboys Broncos hits 000, come park it right here. Join us on YouTube for the recap show. Until then, we are out.